You ever stopped and thought about just how weird the Gungan versus droid battle is in Star Wars Episode 1? You've got an army of underwater frog people facing off against a droid army in what's essentially like a Napoleonic war formation. The boys literally just stand across from each other and go at it, which, hey, I think it's nice. It would make a battle breakdown very simple to illustrate. But why is this battle so weird? Well, there actually is some rationale, some of which is implied by the film itself, others which comes from the expanded universe or source books. I first want to talk about the Gungan army, how they were so advanced, how they were able to at least temporarily face off against the droid army of the Trade Federation, and a lot of this actually comes from the Essential Guide to Warfare. Let's start off with why the Gungan army even exists, and I think if we look at context clues from the film, it's pretty obvious. The Naboo human population does not seem to get along very well with the Gungans. The peace talks, which occur before the end of the battle, are seen to be massively important and indicates a shift in Gungan-Naboo relations. That being said, it's not like they were pushed to the water. Like, the Gungans aren't a nearly extinct species, that's simply where they choose to live. In fact, their migration to the water can actually be tracked to far before their interactions with humans on Naboo. We're getting off topic, but if you've ever seen these statues, the lore is that this species, which are called the Elders, were the ones who forced the Gungans underwater, where they fully transformed into the civilization we see in the movies. These statues are not made by the Gungans, they're ruins from the Elders. Let me know your fan theory on that down below. Anyway, the Gungan military was essentially its police force just called into action. It was made up of, and I quote, able-bodied Gungans who provide their own uniforms and weapons. Each Gungan settlement is required to maintain combat readiness and conduct annual drills, ensuring that the Grand Army can be assembled in less than 36 hours. I always found Gungan technology so interesting because it's just so different from what the rest of the universe offers, and when you see Jar Jar for the first time, you'd not be mistaken to think that the Gungans are primitive, when in fact they're simply in tune with nature in a different way. Militia Gungs, which are the soldiers of the Gungan army, use energy balls, which are basically a membrane containing plasma energy taken directly from Naboo's core. The Gungans living underwater presumably have easy access to geographic features, which allows them easier access to plasma. I actually really like this lore because it ties in nicely with what we see in the rest of the movie. For example, if you've read Darth Plagueis, you're probably familiar with the discussion of the Theed plasma refinery, which is meant to take advantage of the planet's abundant natural resources. That refinery complex is the same place we see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon face off against Darth Maul. So presumably this energy traveling up these shafts here is the same thing contained in the Gungan energy balls. The Gungans also use plasma energy to make their big shields, and I'm guessing most Gungan technology, really, from Oto Gunga to their personal shields, were based on the same technology, which I like because the Gungans seem to be in tune with nature, so I guess this is some way to explain how they're fairly technologically advanced, though I mean there's still some questions to be answered there. The plasma was particularly effective against the droids given that it short-circuited electronics. If we want to talk about how the Trade Federation was able to make an entire military, well, that might be a topic for another video, but it's all explained in Darth Plagueis. The weirdness comes from the fact that the galaxy is supposed to be at peace, and at peace for 1,000 years. The expanded universe tells us that the Ruusan Reformation limited the size of militaries and battleships, yet we see the Trade Federation, a corporation with large battleships and an entire standing military. Well, it all comes down to the fact that they were using supposed pirate attacks on their shipping lanes and cargo ships to justify the creation of all of these weapons of war, and that would really mark the beginning of what would become the Clone Wars. When we talk about the battle itself, it's a very odd one. As I mentioned, it's seemingly straight out of like a Napoleonic or Revolutionary War, both sides standing and fighting, and the Essential Guide to Warfare even notes that this was very, very odd for this point in history. We weren't seeing many ground battles, and specifically not many ground battles where infantry were forced into direct combat. Now, some of this was forced by the powerful Gungan shields, but there was another factor at play here. The Trade Federation rightly realized that this was all probably a ruse, and that there was another main target. However, their big fear was an attack on their droid control ship, which, yes, did come come, but they didn't quite foresee the attack on the capital. Now, that doesn't really matter because it ended up being the attack on the droid control ship, which was determinative, but that's why, despite them being present earlier, we didn't see droid starfighters active on the planet's surface. They were getting ready for an attack in space. I honestly can't really fault the Trade Federation here, because even without their droid starfighters, they still easily beat the Gungan army. It's true that the shields provided some protection, but the droids were able to surround and pick apart the Gungans, which only really had weapons effective against large bunched of enemies. It all came down to the shields, and here's another quote. The resulting plasma shield is 150 meters in diameter and typically calibrated to repel small, fast-moving objects that generate heat, as well as big, slow-moving objects. At Great Grass Plains, it protected the Gungans against the Trade Federation's artillery and tanks, forcing individual battle droids to engage the Gungans. The two-part dynamos overheat quickly and are typically among the first units targeted, giving the cockpit of the shield generator the grim nickname Suicide Seat. And if you're wondering why this technology didn't see wider use after the battle, it's because it was flawed. As we see, you can simply walk through the shield generators and the handheld versions burn out very quickly, which is actually the same problem that all personal shields in Star Wars have, plus the pesky radiation, which can kill you. Those are the details about the battle itself. There's also just some weirdness about how the Battle of Naboo worked generally. The main question is, well, where is the Republic? And it's sort of a weird issue where apparently the blockade itself isn't legal. I don't see how that's possible. How is it legal to starve out a planet because you're a corporate entity with a monopoly on trade? I don't know, like people are dying. Apparently that's legal, but the invasion itself wasn't. I'm guessing the Republic wasn't able to help because they just didn't know until it was too late. There was no fleet close enough to engage the Trade Federation. They kind of had to do it themselves on the ground. Presumably, had Sidious not forced them, this is not something the Trade Federation would have done, because had the Gungans in Naboo not been successful, the Republic would have had to eventually step in, I think, once the invasion became obvious. My biggest question is, how are Newt Gunray and Rune Hako not being hanged on Coruscant for this blatant act of war? Like, they're arrested at the end of the movie, then they kind of just show up later. I'm guessing the Republic at this point is meant to be just so corrupt and beset by corporate influence that, yeah, you could buy your way out of a little thing like a war crime, but whatever. Anyway, that's my look at the Battle of Naboo. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was fun to go back to The Phantom Menace. That movie doesn't get enough love or attention. Let me know your thoughts, though, down below, and if there's another topic you'd like to see me cover in the future, make sure you also include that. Till next time, I'll see you soon. May the Force be with you.